Lucia was a woman with a kind spirit and passionate about animals. Since he was young, he dreamed of working at a zoo and dedicating his life to caring for the creatures he loved. His dream came true when he got a job at a small zoo in a city in Russia. Lucia was known for her unconditional love and dedication to animals, treating each one of them with the affection and respect they deserved. One day, the zoo's routine was shaken by news of the arrival of a new member, a male cheetah named Kale. The news generated great anticipation among zoo employees and visitors. Kale was a majestic animal, and everyone was eager to meet him and see how he would adapt to his new surroundings. They prepared a special enclosure, spacious and full of vegetation, so that Kale could feel as comfortable as possible in his new home. On the day of arrival, a crowd of employees and visitors gathered to see the new inhabitant. The atmosphere was one of joy and excitement. When the transport cage was opened, Kyle slowly came out, but contrary to expectations, he did not explore the enclosure. Instead, he immediately lay down, looking exhausted and uninterested. Kale's reaction surprised everyone, who expected to see the animal explore its new space with curiosity. The zookeepers tried to cheer him up with a special breakfast, offering him the best pieces of meat. But Kale showed no interest. He spent the whole day lying down, without moving, which worried the team. They thought maybe he was just tired from the trip, or scared by his new surroundings. They decided to wait until the next day to see if he would feel better. The next morning, their concern grew when they realized Kale hadn't moved during the night. He continued to lie in the same place, showing no signs of improvement. The team decided to call a veterinarian to examine the cheetah and find out what was wrong. The vet arrived quickly and did a detailed assessment. Upon examining him, he noticed that Kyle was breathing heavily, a worrying sign that indicated something was seriously wrong. After careful analysis, the veterinarian concluded that Kyle had likely contracted a cold during transport, which had progressed to severe pneumonia. The situation was critical and required immediate intervention. The vet explained that Kale urgently needed medication to combat the infection. However, there was one big problem. Kale didn't want to eat or drink, making it extremely difficult to take his medications. Zoo staff went on alert. Everyone was deeply concerned about Kale's health and wondered how they could help him. Lucia, in particular, was desperate to find a solution. She knew that if they couldn't get Kale to take the medicine, he might not survive. The situation was distressing, and everyone felt the weight of responsibility to save the life of the new zoo member. Lucia spent hours thinking about possible solutions. She couldn't bear the thought of losing Kale, such a majestic and beautiful animal. The idea of hand-feeding him began to form in his mind. Although it was risky, she believed this was the only way to ensure Kale received the medicine he needed. Determined to save Kale's life, Lucia decided to present her idea to the zoo staff. The keepers initially rejected Lucia's proposal, claiming it was too dangerous. Hand-feeding a sick cheetah was a risky task, and they feared for Lucia's safety. However, she was not willing to give up. I knew that if they didn't do something drastically, Kale would have no chance of surviving. Lucia decided that if no one else was willing to try, she would take the risk herself. Determined to save Kale, Lucia devised a careful plan to hand-feed the cheetah. She knew she needed to act quickly, as each day without medication made Kale's condition worse. Determined not to give up, Lucia waited until all the keepers were busy with other tasks to put her plan into action. Lucia prepared a piece of meat and soaked it in water, hoping that the aroma and moisture would spark some interest in Kyle. With the meat in hand, she stealthily entered the cheetah's enclosure. Each step was carefully calculated, as any sudden movement could frighten Kyle or, even worse, make him react aggressively. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, but she didn't let fear dominate her. Kyle, still lying down and appearing weak, raised his head when Lucia approached. He watched her with tired eyes, without showing any aggression. Lucia, remaining calm, came a little closer and offered the meat soaked in water. To his surprise and relief, Cale licked the meat, ingesting the water and, with it, some hydration. Delighted with this small success, Lucia continued her efforts. She knew this was just the beginning, but the fact that Kyle accepted the water-soaked meat gave her hope. Over the next few days, Lucia repeated the process, each time adding a small amount of medicine to the meat. Kyle, without realizing the presence of the medicine, began to eat more regularly. Kyle's recovery was slow but steady. The medication began to take effect, and he gradually gained strength. His fur began to regain its shine and his breathing became less labored. Lucia felt immense joy when she saw the signs of improvement in Cale. She knew there was still a long way to go, but every small victory was a big step towards the cheetah's complete recovery. Meanwhile, Lucia and Cale developed a unique bond. With each visit, Cale seemed to recognize Lucia and showed signs of affection. One day, upon seeing her enter the room with more meat, Kyle got up and went to meet her, gently nudging her legs with his head. Lucia, moved, stroked Kyle's head and heard the feline's soft purr, a sound that we normally associate with domestic cats, but which for Kyle sounded like a song of hope. This deep bond between Lucia and Kyle grew stronger every day. The cheetah, now more active and curious, began to explore the enclosure and interact with the environment around it. Lucia felt grateful for every moment she spent with Cale, knowing that she had contributed to his recovery. The love and dedication she dedicated to Cale were rewarded with the big cat's friendship and trust. However, Lucia's happiness was shattered when the zoo faced a severe financial crisis. The administration announced that it could no longer keep Kyle due to the high costs of its maintenance. The devastating news that Kyle would be sold to a circus left Lucia devastated. She knew Kyle deserved more than being an attraction in a circus. He deserved a home where he was loved and cared for. The day Kyle was taken, Lucia couldn't hold back her tears. The cheetah, as if he knew he was being separated from his friend, resisted and growled loudly as he was placed in the transport cage. Lucia, heartbroken, watched her friend leave, not knowing if she would ever see him again. The following days were dark for Lucia, who missed Cale deeply. The years passed slowly for Lucia after Cale's departure. The cheetah's absence left a void in his heart that nothing seemed to fill. She continued to work at the zoo, but always missed her feline friend. The thought of Kyle living in a circus tormented her, and she often wondered about his well-being. 4 long years later, unexpected news brought a ray of hope to Lucia. A circus was in town, and had brought some of its animals to the zoo for a film shoot. Among them was a blind cheetah. Upon hearing this, Lucia's heart sank. Could it be Cale? She needed to find out. Lucia ran to the enclosure where the cheetah was being kept. Upon arriving, he saw the animal lying down, apparently uninterested in its surroundings. Lucia called him by the name she had said so many times. Kyle. The cheetah, who was eating, stopped and turned his head towards the familiar voice. Although he couldn't see it, he recognized the sound of Lucia's voice. With tears in her eyes, Lucia knelt down next to Kyle and hugged him. Kyle stood still for a moment, as if trying to understand the situation. Then, he gently licked Lucia's hand, a gesture that made her cry even more. The reunion was a magical moment, full of emotion and relief. Lucia felt as if an immense weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She couldn't believe that after so long, Cale was back, even partially. After the reunion, Lucia spoke to the circus owner, telling her Cale's story and begging her to stay with him. The circus owner, touched by the depth of the bond between Lucia and Kyle, agreed to leave the cheetah in his care. Lucia couldn't contain her joy. Finally, Kyle could have a home where he would be loved and cared for. With the help of her husband, Lucia built a special enclosure for Kyle in their home. It was a large and safe space where the cheetah could move freely and live with dignity. Lucia and her husband took care of him with love and dedication, ensuring that Kyle received all the necessary care. Despite his blindness, Kyle adapted well to his new environment. He trusted Lucia completely, knowing that she would always be there for him. Kyle's days in his new home were filled with love and affection. Lucia spent hours with him, stroking his head and speaking softly to him. Kyle responded with soft, affectionate purrs, demonstrating his gratitude and love for Lucia. The bond between them was unbreakable, proof that love and dedication can overcome even the greatest adversity. Lucia knew that Kyle wasn't just an animal. He was part of their family. Their story touched the hearts of many, inspiring people to believe in the importance of compassion and care for animals. Lucia's unconditional love for Kyle was an example of how dedication and empathy can make a difference in the life of a living being. Over time, Kyle regained some of his former vivacity. He explored his new home with confidence, always guided by Lucia's comforting presence. Every day was a new opportunity to strengthen the bond between them. Lucia, in turn, felt grateful for every moment she spent with Kyle, knowing that she had saved his life and given him a home where he would always be loved and protected. This story of love and resilience is a powerful reminder that even in the most difficult circumstances, compassion and determination can prevail. Lucia and Kyle's reunion was not only a happy ending to a difficult story, but also a new beginning for both of them, where love and friendship prevail above all else. If this story touched you as much as it touched us, you should watch this video. A man helps a dying polar bear. You won't believe what happened next. Click here to know the full story.